I started buying trading cards on eBay, Facebook Marketplace, and Facebook groups back in 2020 to fund my own personal collection goals. I also had a full-time job and also made sure to prioritize family, friends, community, and just enjoying life as well. Since then, this has grown from a hobby to a full blown TCG business. And today I just wanted to share a little bit of the journey and share my story, a lot of the learnings I've had from 2020 until the business where it's at today in 2026. What's good, everyone? It's Shaq with Sergio's Collection. We are a TCG store. We got our start back in Pokemon. So this is the first video I've shown my face on. Typically, I'm behind the camera just showing you some cards, showing you my collection. But after a lot of friends and folks telling me, hey, it's time to start posting and sharing my knowledge and lessons, I figured, I just want to share what I've learned over the last 7 years in the hobby with everyone else. And so we're going to jump right into it. I have a lot of notes, so if you see me looking around, I'm looking at my notes. It's a lot to remember in 7 years, so a lot to write down. So before I get started, big disclaimer, everyone's situation is different. I came into this hobby with a different situation than a lot. I worked in tech, like I said. I had a full-time job the entire time. I had decent income. I lived below my means. Didn't have a car payment. Bought a car before COVID, cash, pretty cheap car. So was really living frugal for several years. And so I didn't need to take anything out of the business. I could let the business grow and fund the business with its own profits, and I can hold product for longer than most people can. I didn't have to panic sell and things like that. So just wanted to give that disclaimer before we get started. Moving on, I want to talk about really me and when I came into the hobby. I looked around, did a lot of research when I first started, and really wanted to focus on three things. One was around customer service. I just wanted to make sure that, every response gets followed up on, every issue gets followed up on, any negative review gets followed up on. Just really want to create a welcoming environment to keep people coming back to the hobby. So that was kind of the first thing that I pride myself in. I think two was really about fast shipping. Just in today's day and age, shipping is just key to anything. And so just wanted to make sure that that was something from day one that we took pride in. And then third, just a great selection. This was harder, as you know, when you get started. You don't have distro, you don't have a lot of the different things, and so it's really hard to get started. But that was kind of the North Star, the goal over the 7 years. Not when we started, but hey, in 5 years and 10 years, what do I want people to remember Sergio's Collection by? So that was kind of what we got started. I would say the goal of this video, and then the goal of like my channel going forward. I know I did an intro video a while back. When I didn't know what I was doing. The goal is really to share what I've learned, have a lot of fun. I think this is a fun hobby, and I want to keep it that way. Not always talk about the numbers and finances, but talk about fun stuff. Talk about pack openings. Talk about the newest set, just different things like that. And then help others navigate how to grow their own TCG business if that's what they're doing, or just any business. A lot of the fundamentals are the same. Widget is just a different widget. So, and really mainly for folks who are trying to do this while they have a full-time job. Because that's kind of what my experience has been, not having full, just all the time during the day to work on this. So we're going to jump into it. I'm about to look at my notes and then we'll get started. So we'll start with 2020. So 2020, really jump back in. So I found my old collection and was back home, parents visiting, and found my own collection and started looking up prices. Saw, okay, well, this is interesting. And then started watching a lot of videos and really wanted to restart my collection goals and had a couple of goals in mind. So, like I said, did a lot of extensive research, started listing my own cards on eBay, created an eBay account, did all that, picked a name, Sergio's Collection, and watched countless YouTube videos, everything from finding collections on Facebook to in eBay to understanding the hobby, like understanding what's what, who's who, how things work, what's the popular sets, what are the cards, what are the rarities, all of those different things like that. Really wanted to make sure I'm jumping in and not just spending money. So like I said, my initial inventory was my own collection. And then I started buying collections in about October of 2020. Started with selling my collection in about $1,500 of personal money, and then also credit cards. So I know Rudy did a video on this a while ago in terms of how to structure your credit card payments. And so one thing I'll advise, if you don't have the money, do not do this. But I had the money, and so it was more of a, hey, this is just 60-day kind of float when I could pay that back, regardless if I sell the items or not. So just that's caveat. Not everyone can start out in the same position I started out, so I understand that. But just want to let you know that's how it started out. So bought some collections, really sorted through them, sold some, and then kept the ones that I was working on. I remember at the time I was working on like a Gen 1, I think base set initially, then kind of expanded to more of the Gen 1 cards. Bought supplies and stuff when needed, learned about all that as well, and then really started focusing on collecting, and then went deep in grading, and made a lot of mistakes there. And just because you buy a collection and cards look near mint doesn't mean that they're near mint. So had some growing pains there. A lot of vintage cards that were graded that were 4 or 5 6s and things like that I thought were going to come back 8, 9. So learned a lot and gained a lot of knowledge from that. And then I had a really big first order day on eBay. I'll probably try to add it to the video and put it up here in this corner. Just kind of that first sales day, kind of put it all out on my bed and took a picture of all the bubble mailers. And I was like, okay, like this is something, right? This is a good start. And it really helped fund a lot of my goals. And so some of the purchases this year, I think I probably purchased. When I start anything, I kind of go just heads first into it. So I think I probably purchased around 100 cards. A lot of that was bulk, but one of the things, I had a $2,000 Japanese collection that had about 500 cards in there. This had a lot of Versus series. A lot of those cards were actually in mint condition. I think the Umbreon came back at PSA 9. Had a complete Southern Islands and a complete vending series. All the hollows from Neo Revelation, Team Rocket, Gym Heroes, Gym Challenge, and then some hollows from some of the other Gen 1 sets, and then most of the non-hollows, and then more in that collection. But like I said, that was Japanese version of those sets. And then I bought a $1,000 collection that had about 200 cards. This was also a vintage lot. This included the big 3 hollows from base set in pretty good condition, and then I bought about a 15K card collection for about 1.3K, all vintage across variety of conditions. One note: this is back in 2020. These prices aren't the same anymore, so don't think you're going to be able to get these prices if you started today. But this was back when I started. That was what the hobby was. My sales channel was mainly eBay, listing individual cards, taking photos. Back then, I did a couple of buy lists with Troll and Toad just to get rid of bulk. I didn't really want to list 25, 40-cent cards on eBay and take pictures and all that, so I just kind of sold a lot of that on Troll and Toad and just made sure I came out on top regardless. And then Facebook groups. I joined a bunch of Facebook groups, learned how, willing to sell posts work, willing to buy posts work, claim sales work, learned all that, and did a bunch of claim sales early on to kind of get a lot of that collections that I bought that I didn't want to keep sold. Made a lot of great friends early in the hobby that I'm still friends with to this day. I look back and saw some comments and messages from one of my first buyers, which is actually one of my good friends today. This is pretty much 2020. We had one big scam in November 2020. I had a 1K purchase on Facebook group. This guy had a Shining Charizard and a Neo booster pack. He sold it to me. I think it was about 1K at the time. And then I ended up getting a Dreadnought V and a Grippsnarl V. So I was not happy. Took a while to get back. He made a bunch of excuses, really realized it was a scam, and then I eventually PayPal. Thankfully, they don't always do this, but PayPal got my money back. So that was 2020, just getting my start, making a lot of mistakes, failing a lot. Year 1 revenue was about $9,000. So moving into 2021, this is when we made it a real store. I started an LLC. I learned about this great site at the time called TCG Player after getting tired of taking a bunch of photos and individual listing on eBay. Made it to level 4 really quickly. I looked at the requirements. I said, okay, let's figure out how to get there. I had a lot of inventory, so I was like, who cares if I lose a couple of dollars on a couple cards if I can get there quicker? So priced a couple cards at TCG low so they could sell quickly. Obviously, when you're a new seller, you have zero feedback. So I listed a little lower just so I can get that initial sale, as well as boxes, because there's the quantity of orders, but there's also a sales number. So I listed a couple boxes a little bit lower, so that way I can get to that level 4 quickly. And I got it within a month, I believe. Whatever the max time frame is when you get all the orders delivered. Also, if you want to get it faster, just do tracking so that way when it gets marked delivered, it automatically pushes that date up and shows as delivered, versus when you have a plain white envelope, it's going to take a lot longer to mark delivered. So I just got there really quickly. I wanted to get there really quickly. I wanted to start collecting reviews. I think that's everything in the hobby. You want to build that trust with your community and ship fast and have great service. And then we had one issue early on with refunds. We had 2 refunds, and they had this limit on there. And so I just had to reach out and say, hey, we're moving a lot of inventory. Can we get our refunds up? Some people have buyer's remorse, and they increased that. So nothing crazy with them, but it was a great platform to kind of get started that day. So distribution, this is when I kind of started building a list. I have a spreadsheet with all the distributor lists, and I have a calendar reminder every 6 months, and I just started applying to every single one. Of course, back then, they weren't really accepting online. There was a couple of online people that had it, but a lot of them had already closed online because in 2020 things had picked up. So by the time I was kind of on my footing and all that, they already closed. So applying to them, kept getting rejected in 2021. Grading, got big into grading, of course. I feel like everybody did back then. So graded Gym, as we all know, used them before everything got crazy, and then went over to James, who kind of took over and finished that, and used him, and phenomenal guy with Z&G. So used him, build a friendship and connection with him. Still friends to this day, and love what he's doing over there with his business now. Subscribed to a bunch of Patreon. So at the time I was with listen to SM Pratt, listen to Rudy, and then a few others on their Patreon to support. Some of the purchases I made. So this year I look back and I don't have a lot of these, but hey, a Pikachu Snap magazine trainer, a CD promo sealed, a large amount of vintage EXs that we all know are pretty hard to find. Greninja, so I started my Greninja collection goals, like you'll see a bunch of the videos. So this is when I started buying a lot of that. Thankfully started pretty early. Pikachu, I got a Pokemon Center 10th anniversary promo that I eventually graded it and it graded a 10. Diamond and Pearl, I also started collection goals there. So I had every level X, had every secret rare, and had had an art set of all the Gen 4 booster packs, as well as Gen 4 and then Heart Gold Soul Silver. I had a Cora Mew that was sealed. I also brought a 3DS, and I bought version X of Pokemon, and then I bought Diamond because I wanted to play the games and relive it and just kind of get back into that mode. When I do market research, I want to kind of deep dive and get into that. So I also watched all the movies, and then I watched a couple of the series based on I think I started at Gen 4, and then I watched it up until Sun and Moon to just catch up. And I was in Gen 4, but then kind of a black and white. Believe I was in college. Or I was in high school and kind of fell out and then came back in. So black and white mainly, and XY I needed to get a lot of knowledge and catch up on, as well as Sun and Moon. So that was really what I did. Like I said, no luck on the distributors this year, but I wouldn't give up. So this year was a big year on just learning, growing, trying different things, seeing what stuck. And this year revenue was about $57.4 thousand. So 2021 complete, still good, still going. Still have a large kind of single card position. Don't have as much sealed product because I don't have distributors, so I'm going to buy it off, just market price. 2022, I applied for a reseller's license in Texas, and I get it. I continue to apply for my distributors, and somehow, it was a fluke, I applied for all of them in one day. Alliance, now Universal. I guess they called me, and I guess the market had cooled down early 2022. We know some of those sets were awful at the time. I'm sure there are videos online where you see content creators getting, a bunch of them from stores who are trying to fire sell for $80, $90. So things cooled down. So distributors are figuring out because people weren't taking their allocation. So they accepted me, thankfully. And my first product was Dragon Ball Super Master. Well, it wasn't called Masters because there was only one set at the time, but it was Realm of the Gods. I got 85 boxes of that, and somehow Dragon Ball just spiked at the time, and the prices went up astronomically. So I sold probably half of it to recoup costs, and I just held on to I think 4 or 5 cases, and I sold the rest over the next few months. But it was I was like, oh, this is cool. So kept doing that. My first Pokemon product order was 51 ETBs of Astro Radiance and then 30 booster boxes. And then my biggest spend item of the year, I bought the next Dragon Ball Super set was Dawn of the Z Legends, 118 booster boxes. For some reason, Dragon Ball Super had a resurgence, even though the show was finished, and that was also kind of the next kind of trading card brand that I kind of deep dived on. So went big on that as well, just because I wanted to get my allocation spend up. Because I watched a lot of videos and understanding how the distributors work is hey, spend money to be able to get more, and I wanted to build up because I knew that the hobby is going to continue to grow. And then I saw that Pokemon, even though these sets weren't that great, that there's still an affinity for it. So did a heavy grading and selling as well. Used Z&G for that. At that time, he was, I think, piloting. After Graded Gem finished all the orders, he was piloting, okay, hey, now we can actually sell your cards for you on your behalf. At the time, he was doing also, he can grade them for you and then sell them for you. I used that heavily. I think it was 40% of my revenue came from me just hey, I don't want to deal with this. Can you sell all that stuff? I had just, maybe this year or the year before, I just started a new job, and it was a tech startup, and I was running operations for them. So a lot of work and a lot of bandwidth. It was remote though, so that helped, but I still didn't have as much time to be able to sit there and piece out cards, list everything, and sell everything. So it was a big help with it, especially with his fees were about the same as I was going to be paying, and I don't have to do the work. I did a pretty big Gen 4 claim sale, so I really stopped that collection goal in about May of 2022. I was like, I have too many goals, I have too many things. This is turning into a real store, so let me stop that. So I did a big claim sale on Facebook over 5 weeks. Shout out to everyone who's bought from me in Facebook. I think I still have a list of probably like 300-400 people over time that have bought from me. Like I said, a few of them are still pretty close friends of mine. Sold about 430 cards for about $4.8 thousand on that claim sale. Did my first Collecticon in 2022, one of the first ones. You know, met a lot of the content creators, became friends with a lot of them, learned a lot about that. Signed up for Whatnot, but never used them. Should have signed up. Somehow I got my name at Shaq. I still get pinged to this day for people referring to Shaquille O'Neal on there. But hey, it is what it is. Maybe one day I'll start selling on there, but the fees have just continued to increase, so maybe not. So at Collecticon, I had a pretty big lot that I was planning to list to PSA, but at that time, I got burnt out from just grading cards. I graded probably a couple thousand cards at the time, and it was just a lot of waiting, for PSA to not be backed up anymore. So I sold them to Don Diego Trading. Met her, a couple other content creators there, and I was like, hey, I have this big purchase, so sold a lot of stuff to that. So I sold about 356 cards for about 8.5K. And then I sold a bunch of Gen 4 packs. They were basically all the art sets that I got in from Diamond and Pearl, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, as well as some black and white packs and XY. Didn't sell all of them, but I sold most of them. About 2.9K for about 41 packs. I did have about 43 packs total, but me and Swolepoke did a pack battle for Legendary Treasures, and he won. So he got all the stuff from those 2 packs. So that was fun. First Collecticon. Decided I wanted to go to more. Obviously, the first year I think they did 1 or 2. I think Orlando was the first one. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while, so forgive me if I'm wrong. Some of the highlights: sold a Stormfront Charizard PSA 9 for $950. Maybe it's a low light because now that card is a lot more. I had 2 of those. I think I kept 1 and I sold it the next year. Another, I don't know why I put these highlights. Evo Skies ETB. I sold that for ETB case. I sold that for $550. Evolving Skies ETB case. Yeah, probably not a highlight. I think now it's like 4,500 or something like that. And then One Piece came out at the end of the year, so I was one of the first to order it with my distro, and I got 2 cases. There was a whole issue with One Piece printing with Bandai. Bandai's always been known for bad printing, and so they just didn't really print enough, not even enough for stores to have like at pre-releases. It was a mess, but I got 2 cases of that, and they were the blue bottom ones. I think I just held on to those for a bit after that year. Also, I almost started a TCG fund just to kind of, me being in tech and being an investor at one point in my career, I just saw kind of, hey, I know now you have like Catch 'em All collectibles and other people are basically having a pallet and they're like keeping it for 10 years. But that was what I was doing. I was planning on raising about $2.5 million. I had raised $450 already. And then I was working with a third party to manage the fund admin, and they just kept pushing me to raise more. Keep increasing the fund so they can have bigger fees, and they were trying to put a lot of fees on my investors, and so ended up not doing that. Probably should have continued to do that, just do it on my own, and maybe start with the $500,000 fund. So a lot of the things that I had in there, and I had the contacts in the hobby to look for those, and different just trophy cards and booster boxes from every single set. So kind of kicking myself for not doing that, but you live and you learn, and at least I was directionally accurate. So that was 2022. Yearly revenue for 2022 was 137.2K. So you can see, we went from 9K to about 57K to about 137. So we're continuing to grow and improve. Like I said, not taking any money out of the business now, just continuing to put money in, as well as having a lot of inventory. So at the end of the year, buying a lot of supplies and things like that. But just keep in mind, when you buy inventory at the end of the year, that doesn't really help reduce kind of your overall taxes. That's just going to give you more inventory. What you have to do is sell product to get your cost of goods sold up. So that was 137, sitting on a lot of product that year. So moving into 2023, by this point, the business is running smoothly. I'm thinking I'm doing great. I was doing 10K plus a month. I didn't really focus much on the store in terms of just like hours wise. I was spending a little time on it. I had actually left the startup I was at, and I raised some capital to go start a company. That took most of my attention. Hindsight's 2020, but I wish I had just focused on this business and grow it, and maybe would have been where we're at now then. I didn't do much grading this year. Like I said, my focus was shifted. Graded about 265 total cards. My only distro was still Alliance, but they were I wanted to grow my allocation in Alliance. my rep, I kept talking to them. I was, you could tell I was like serious and growing, but because of like online sellers and how in the past a lot of these distros have been burned by online sellers when things, are not as great anymore, those online sellers disappear, and guess who's left holding the bag? So because of that, I was kind of, had a scarlet letter on, and unfortunately, they just, even though I had the capital to spend, they would not, right? So I had to partner with another store, a store that I reached out to like 20 stores. So this is another way. I don't think it's going to work today, but you can try it. I reached out to another store who I can see they're smaller. They wanted to grow. So it's like, hey, like, I'm such and such. I've been doing this for 4 years now. I'm trying to grow my allocation with Alliance. I know you have Alliance as well, or that's what they told me. So I said, I know you have a distributor. I would love to partner with you and give you my like order so you can add to that allocation. And this was with Alliance because they had One Piece, and so I really wanted to get One Piece. And One Piece was just printed so low that I needed multiple sources. And so partnered with them, and we basically, let's say they were a small store. He ordered 60 boxes of, OP4. I would order another 120. And he may get 100. And so he would take a 60 and I would get my 40. And I felt good about that. So I did that for a while. SV era started. Back then, Scholar and Violet started with kind of the base set. I think I had like 80 boxes of that. That was probably one of the first things that I lost some money on. I should have just held them, but sold a bit of those for kind of at cost or a little bit above, but with shipping and all that, probably lost $1 or $2 per box. So it didn't start off great. Everyone was complaining about the terrestrial, complaining about a lot of things. Typically every generation, it ebbs and flows, and people have these comments, but we know where Scholar and Violet is today. So back then I could get 4+ ETBs, Pokemon Center, no problem. They would stay on there for weeks. Weeks. So different time now. Some of the highlights, and the first few years I went into a lot more detail. The next 3 years there may be some detail, but kind of a little less than kind of the learning years. This is more of just kind of growing. So some of the highlights, One Piece was pretty big because I got that second partner with another store, and then my distro somehow I kept bugging enough that he got me a lot. But so OP5, Awakening of the New Hero, kind of their first anniversary set. Just fire. It had 3 manga cards in there, a Gear 5 Luffy. It just hits after hits. It also had the sign copy by Oda on there. I had 324 boxes of that. So, that's for my distro. I got 324 boxes for my distro. I got another 144 from the store that I partnered with. I was so scared that they were gonna see it and then like not send me my order. But he kept true to his word. And then I also bought a bunch of more boxes from PF Football on eBay. And I actually bought them like 2 weeks before they skyrocketed. I think I got them for like 110 or 105, and I think they skyrocketed to like 200 or whatever. And so I was also scared because what if you didn't fill that order? But got all that. And then because of that, I was like, it's Christmas, it's holiday time coming up. I wanted to do something to give back. So I did a massive sale on Facebook for the holidays. I think I sold probably 300 or something of those boxes for 20 to 30% under market at the time. So also made some really good friends in my OG kind of OP One Piece, my One Piece community. So shout out to all y'all that purchased from that sale. Y'all got a really good deal. I think those boxes are $1,000 now. So I had 468 plus. I could have kept them all, but as a store, you have to kind of use judgment and sell some to recoup costs. And at the end of the day, like, you still made money on it. So when I think about regret, I don't regret when I sell stuff and I profit from it and I made a profit, and also some other people can get it for collection. I don't want to hoard. I'm not a hoarder. I had a case or two after that, and I eventually sold those too. But it is what it is. We're a store. So another 151 UPCs. I had 120 boxes. I actually my brother and we ripped about 100 of these. And now we know what those UPCs are going for now for Pokemon 151. So that was another big one in 2023. I had a bunch of Dragon Ball Super signature cards. That was another one of my collection goals, and I sold a lot of that in 2023. And then I had Unagaba promos. I saw what the Pikachu one did, and saw all the Evolutions ones. I bought a bunch from Japan, and I graded 246 of them. Of course, I thought I was getting like an even amount of each, but of course the Umbreon, they had like, I guess they could see through them and search them. There was like only like 10 Umbreons in there. But through that I got 2 Black Labels. I got a Flareon, and I think I got a Sylveon Black Label. I don't remember. And then I got a bunch of PSA 10s, a bunch of Becca 10s, and then I got an Umbreon 10, and then a PSA 10 Umbreon. So pretty good all in all if I had held every single one of them until now, but I sold a good amount of them. I have a little bit left now. Some of the lowlights. So I had a Dragon Ball Super Masters now. Goku the Awakened Power PSA 10. I think I bought it for like 1,000 or like 800, and then I graded it and it came back at 10. And I sold it on eBay to a Chinese seller. So they purchased it, and the transit took forever. I think this was before I got into eBay International. So I now use eBay International to ship, but before I just shipped it on my own with UPS, and it took forever and it got lost, and so I had to refund the buyer $5,000. And then 2 weeks later, tracking magically updated, and a week later from that, it was delivered. So you can probably take a guess if I got my money back. No, I did not, and the seller deleted their eBay account and everything. So it is what it is. So yeah, and then I also all the Romance Dawn blue boxes that I had, blue bottoms that I had, I sold most of those probably at $300. So low light in the sense of like now they're, I don't know, I don't look at those things but anymore because I would be living in regret. But $5,000, $6,000 now or whatever. But sold most of them at $300, and then DBS died down towards the bit of the year, and that was a lot of my allocation and a lot of the stuff I was getting from Alliance, and so it really took a hit to kind of just profitability and revenue wise. So 2023 continue to grow, not quite doubling but close, $245,000 and $800. So 2024 kind of started shifting to buying Japanese. I was like, look, I need more product. We're growing. I got to feed the beast. I need more product. So started buying Japanese. Started testing with different sellers in small quantities. This is before tariffs and all that. And then kind of building that trust. And so what I did was I placed like a 5-box or 10-box order with 10 different sellers. I noted their shipping speed. I noted their service quality. I noted their price. I noted their response time. All those things like that. I noted all those things about those sellers. And then, if anybody tried to scam me, I noted that. And then finally, I had like 3 finalists. I said, okay, like, after a few orders from these 3, I trust these 3. These are going to be my 3 going forward. So that's kind of how I did it. On Instagram, you never know who these people are. A lot of them are like, hey, I'm this seller over here. So you really want to trust and build that trust and build that, trust but verify. So that's what I did. I lost a little bit from some of the sellers that were shady or whatever, but at least I learned with a 5 to 10 box order versus 100. And at the time, Japanese boxes were $50. So it wasn't that big of a deal for me personally with the business. I also started diving a lot more into analytics. I basically had like a weekly task to like check daily sales, like sales velocity on TCG Player, just to really look at, okay, hey, like this, Kingdoms of Intrigue is a perfect example. I bought a bunch for my distro when no one wanted it because it was right back down to cost, and I just got as much as I could, and I just said, okay, well, like, I know this is really short printed, it's Bandai, and I know they're selling like 40 a week. There's like 400 copies, like in 10 weeks, TCG Player's gonna be over. And of course, there's more copies added and all that, but there's also copies taken away. And so, like, yeah, sure enough, 3 months later, it jumped up over $100, and then, everybody wanted it. And so just did a lot of analytics to understand kind of like how the hobby works, how ebbs and flows, how scarcity works, especially with products like that aren't get printed. And as we know, in today's environment, Pokemon doesn't have enough printers to print anything, apparently, at restock. So, yeah, so, and then also hired my brother and sister-in-law as 1099 to work and handed off a lot of the online business to them. So they did all the fulfillment, all the packing, shipping, customer service across TCG Player. They handled that, and then I did the ordering, talking to the distro, anything on the front end. I wanted to kind of work more on the business versus in the business. And then, like I said, I still had that startup that I started the year before. And so this is kind of still what it looks like today. They kind of run the fulfillment and everything, after kind of checkout, and then I do everything before. And they sometimes help with inventory. I sold a lot of my seal cases. I had a collection goal again of just collect a bunch of seal cases. I was kind of doing what Catch 'em All Collectibles is doing now with the pallets. Back in 2024, I had basically a bunch of cases of every single Scarlet and Violet, every single Sword and Shield set. And this is back when, Sword and Shield was still, a lot of the sets besides Evolving Skies was going for $700, $800 for a case. And Scarlet and Violet, you can get those at cost at that point, right? No one wanted Paldea Evolve. No one wanted those things. Twilight Masquerade was like the hot set, and that came out. When I came out, I think it was selling for like $130 or $125. So I went into grading heavily this year because, every year is different. You got to do different strategies to make money. So did really well this year, but it was really time consuming. Some of the new things I started ordering Dragon Ball Super Fusion World, First set was good. Second set was okay. And third set just kind of tanked and fell off. Unit Arena, started ordering that, but I was skeptical of any new Bandai product, so I ordered a little bit of that. Just because Bandai loves to release all these different things. I think they did Battle Spirits, and that failed pretty quickly, and I feel bad for any store that ordered a bunch of that. I expanded kind of on my sales channels, so I started selling on TCG Direct, so I signed up with them, started moving a lot of my singles to that in direct sales. I started selling on TikTok Shop, created a TikTok account and all that. Didn't really post much content, but I had a lot of sales initially. I finally set up our own website on Shopify. I was hesitant because I have to drive traffic to that site, and it just didn't seem like worth the effort in terms of just spending money on ads or whatever to drive traffic to a website when there's millions of other companies competing with the same thing online. And so your ad costs could be high. So I never really did it. So it was more of a, hey, people find me online and buy stuff. What really helped was TikTok Shop had integration with that. So now my Shopify website's integrated with TikTok Shop as well as Rare Candy. And so anything I posted on my website could get sold there. So that really was an incentive for me to start selling on my website, just to have one place that I list and everything else gets situated. I signed up to sell on Amazon. Signed up and became ungated for TCGs and Pokemon and all that, but never sold anything. I think at the time FBA fees just kind of deterred me. As a reseller, we're not a brand owner, so like I'm not getting 50% margin on any item at the time. So it didn't make sense to give FBA all that money, and as well as 15% referral fees. It just didn't make sense, as well as like you're kind of out of luck for returns and things like that. So that was kind of the sales channels. Towards the end of the year, the market really started to move up. Surging Sparks is really where it took off, and thankfully I got a decent amount of that. One Piece really started slowing down as Pokemon picked up steam around like OP7, OP6, OP7. Those were kind of when it started to slow down. Boxes would come out. Pre-order price would be 110, 120, and then it would drop to $80, and then it would stay for 80 to 90 for 2-3 months, and then it would jump up to like 100, and then there's a restock, and then it would go down again. It was a whole thing. One Piece was stressing at that point. Some of the highlights, though, we actually got our second distributor, ACDD. That was our second distributor. Like I said, every 6 months we're applying. We've done that since 2021 until today. Every 6 months we're applying all the distros, and you can say no to me, but hey, I'm going to keep coming back. I don't care about rejection. So, really glad I got them because Alliance had started pulling back with giving us Pokemon. So this really helped. When you think about 2024 is really when people started seeing Pokemon pick up. So they started playing the allocation game again. The allocation game is what they played in 2020 and 2021, where hey, you order a lot and you're happy if you get 10%. When you order 2,000, you get 200 boxes. You're great. So that they started placing the allocation game, and as orders came in, pre-orders came in, they started fulfilling theirs over mine. And then finally, our biggest purchases, we had 140 boxes of Surging Sparks on release, and we had about 102 of Twilight Masquerade. Still a decent amount, but I mean, just being honest, I think I placed an order for 700-800. So I got allocated heavily. So little did I know that was going to be the peak in terms of product. Some bad deals overseas. I had a one bad deal with one of the Japanese sellers. They had did a lot of Chinese stuff as well, and they had the simplified 151, and they also had the gem packs. And those were all the craze in December of 2024. Bought $10,000 worth of that, and all of a sudden he goes dark. There was like 40 people on Facebook. There was a whole like scandal about it. 40 people on Facebook had bought this. I started reaching out to people, asking them like, what is he telling you? He's telling people different things. He said it was working with a freight forwarder. That freight forwarder lost the inventory, whatever it was. But I had two different payments with him. I think $5,000 each, and basically PayPal again. Thankfully, it took me so long to get PayPal to do it because I need goods and services, and of course with TCGs that is not included in their terms. But thankfully, because of there was like a loophole, not shipped. There was another one that I used, and they basically refunded for that. So any questions on that, I could probably find it and answer that in the comments later. But 2024, like I said, peak revenue was $367,000. And one side note, my back orders from distro was about $582,000. I started tracking my back orders because they just stopped restocking as much, right? The printers were busy and everything. And then also my allocation, I used to get about 75% of my allocation, and that dropped to 10% or less, depending on the stuff. So that was 2024. Kind of peak. In terms of us, 2025, Pokemon really took off. I mean, every set feels like it was just a hit. Of course, we start out with Prismatic Evolutions, all the way to Phantasmal Flames. We went really, really heavy into Japanese. We had a bunch of Terrasto Festival that, of course, we bought in December, and then we started selling TikTok Shop. I think we sold probably 500 boxes on TikTok Shop. This is our biggest item by far to kind of start the year, and then followed by Inferno X. Both, if you see both Japanese sets, kind of led the way for us. And I just tried. I think we also, everyone was thinking about, okay, how do we get all this in before any tariffs or whatever starts? Distros really started pulling back on online stores and more storefronts. A lot of more storefronts opened up in 2025. They took allocation as well as existing storefronts increased their allocations. So this is my lowest distro year spend since 2020, since we first got our alliance as a distro. One Piece, of course, jumped back up like always. It just went crazy. I remember, I think EBO 2, I barely could get any of that. And I think it was selling for like $200 something on release or something like that. I started buying Gundam came out. I think I bought the first set of that. And then Cookie Run, I bought a decent amount of that. Took me a while to sell through a lot of the inventory, but thankfully made profit on that. Now it has a little more staying power. I'm also selling it on Amazon, and it's doing decently well on Amazon, selling closer to MSRP there. So that was pretty much the kind of the new things that I jumped into. And then by 2025, the allocation game I told you about, everyone was playing that. So, everyone was ordering 5,000 boxes of Prismatic, and they're getting 50, right? And so you have this massive, massive backlog for each of us. And so, can't beat them, join them. So I did it, and we played the allocation game. Got a decent amount, but not much because, like I said, Alliance was pulling back. ACD actually wasn't pulling back, but because I had less spend, because I had just started with them the year before, because I had less spend, it took me a while to build that up. So I wasn't getting a lot of stuff, and because when it got hot, everyone else wanted it. I didn't get much allocation. But Alliance actually also, they turned off my ordering for online stores. I was spending a decent amount with them every year. They limited me to like 5K per item purchase. And then at some point they limited to 3K. So how it worked is they went off your last, I think, 12 months of spend for overall. But because they kept limiting me, every new month there was less overall spend. So by, month 5 or 6, now my overall spend looks like I'm a really tiny store because they weren't giving me much. So it went from 5K to 3K to like 1,500 per item or whatever. And I couldn't order myself. I had to reach out to my rep every time for pre-orders and whatever. And if my pre-order was above that $5,000 item, they had to cut me down, right? So, but, I was an online store. I had no control. I didn't want to open a brick and mortar at the time or anything. So it was what it is, It is what it is, It is what it is, So yeah, so by the end of the year, my backlog, sat well over, I think like over 2.5 million, with 99% of those items never getting filled. And at a certain point, Alliance started dropping a lot of those off. Same thing with ECDD. For example, like I had a lot of early Scarlet and Violet on there, and they all dropped off. I had a lot of One Piece on there, and they all dropped off after a certain point. So I don't know if it was distro or just Pokemon or One Piece were stopped printing those. So that was really 2025. I also shut down the other business I was working on, and started a new job full time that I'm still working to this day. So ended that year at about 38,000, I ended that year at about $381,100. So best year, but you can see from 2025 we were at 367, and then 2024 we were at 367, and 2025 we were at 381. So not great, but increased, but still, we're doing great, but slowing down just because of all the different, headwinds against us, and just Pokemon's popularity and more stores coming in taking allocation. You have like, Bass Fishing Pro and, all these corner stores and everyone else getting the allocation, and not to mention GameStop getting in. And so a lot of that took a lot of allocation away from online sellers. And then also, I didn't talk about this at all, but streaming. Of course, 2024 streaming kind of took off. And then 2025 just continued to grow and scale, and now to this day it's still that way. So streaming also took a lot because somehow a lot of these streamers, even though they're online, I guess they can get around the rules, and they got a lot of allocation from a lot of the distros as well. And when you look at a streamer, they're opening 1,000 packs a day, right? So when you're selling, maybe 10 boxes a day, 20 boxes a day, you're not going to be able to compete. So, and for distros, money talks. It is what it is. So it brings us to 2026. So we're 7 months in. This has been a long video, so I'm not going to talk much longer, but it's been a good year so far. A lot of things in the works, a lot of plans in the works. Distro spend is still down from its peak, but it's still better than 2025. We also started selling on Amazon a few months ago and really have plans to scale that. We did well during Prime Day, and it's been going well. Mainly selling booster boxes and stuff. I started selling supplies, and just the work to label those, ship those, and send them to FBA. We also had like, let's say a sleeves. We did like multi packs. So we did 2 packs or 5 packs, and then like imagine taking those sleeves, putting them into a large team bag or whatever, and then shipping that. There's so much work that goes into that. So, and then that's not me. That's my brother and sister-in-law doing that. That's my online team doing that. And so, I think going forward, if we have to do some supplies just to kind of move some stuff, we will. But for the most part, we're just gonna do booster boxes and just seal product. The margin's better. Even if I'm making a few dollars, it's still better than 20 cents or 50 cents from a pack that took forever to get. And then also by doing booster boxes and things like that, it just increases my allocation of my distros. So that's kind of my plan to scale Amazon. And there's some other plans that I'm going to talk about in another video coming up. So just stay tuned for that. And then I'll probably do a 2026 recap video early next year, since we have about 5 months left in the year. So this is a long video. If you stayed for the entire thing, appreciate you. If you have any questions about anything, if you want me to go into detail about any topic, I'm happy to do just the longer videos for specific topics, whether it's talking about how to get a distro, talking about how, I use like credit cards to get started and grow the business through that, even though I had the funds myself. Like, remember, make sure you have the money. Or just any other questions you may have about the journey, or just things that you want me to touch on. I'm happy to go in a deeper dive and do a video on that, walk through that. So leave your questions and comments. Like they usually say, you can like and subscribe and follow along on the journey. It's going to be a fun journey. It's been a great kind of first, 6.5, 7 years, and I think the next 5 to 10 years is gonna be great. So hopefully you can join on the ride, and then we'll see where we go and take this business and this thing that started as a hobby with Sergio's collection and just take it to another level. So I'm excited about what's to come. Stay tuned for the video soon. That's gonna kind of show you where the next step for us is. But thanks for watching. Until next time, peace.